In a small coastal town, Mia and Lucas were inseparable, bound by a love that began in childhood. They grew up together, exploring the wild beaches, chasing each other through the sand, and sharing their dreams under the vast sky. The beach was their sanctuary, a place where they made plans for the future, believing that no matter what, they would always be together. As they grew older, life began to pull them in different directions. When Lucas turned 18, he enlisted in the military, feeling it was his duty to serve. Though Mia was proud of him, she couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness when he left. They promised to write to each other every week, to never let distance change what they had. And for a time, the letters came regularly, each one a reminder of their love, their shared memories, and the future they dreamed of. But as the months passed, the letters became less frequent. Mia waited anxiously for each one, counting the days between them. There were no more long, heartfelt messages, no more promises of coming home. Lucas became distant in his words, as if the weight of the world had begun to press down on him. Still, Mia held on to hope, believing that their love would overcome the separation. She clung to the last few letters with a fierce determination, reading them over and over again as if she could somehow find him again in the words he had written. Then one fateful day, the letter came. Mia was sitting in her small cottage by the sea, the scent of salt water in the air, when the envelope arrived. She was expecting another of Lucas's infrequent letters, but what she found inside was far different. It was from the military, not from Lucas. Her heart dropped as she read the words, each one more devastating than the last. Lucas had been declared missing in action. The words blurred together as the world around her seemed to collapse. She couldn't believe it. It felt like a nightmare, an impossible reality. She read the letter again, hoping the words would change, but they didn't. Lucas was gone, and there was no telling if he was alive or dead. Mia was shattered. The pain of losing Lucas was unbearable, but the uncertainty of not knowing where he was, whether he was alive or suffering, was even worse. She couldn't let go. She refused to give up on him. Every night, she sat by the window, gazing out at the ocean, hoping for a sign, hoping for some miracle that would bring him back to her. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Still, Mia clung to hope. She had one last letter from Lucas, the one he had sent just before he left. In it, he had written, "No matter where I am, my heart will always find its way back to you." She held on to those words as if they were a lifeline, whispering them into the wind as if sending them to him. But life continued, and Mia had to keep going. The town around her seemed to move on, but she remained in limbo, caught in a space between the past and the future, unsure of how to live without Lucas. Her days were filled with the same routine, working in the small cafe by the beach, watching the waves roll in, and hoping for something, anything, to change. Yet, despite her fear that she was losing him forever, there was a part of her that still believed that Lucas would keep his promise. He would come back to her. One evening, a violent storm rolled in from the sea. The wind howled, and the rain lashed against the windows of Mia's cottage. It was the kind of storm that felt like nature itself was mourning alongside her. She stood at the window, watching the fierce waves crash against the shore, the dark sky a mirror of the emptiness she felt inside. And then, in a moment of impulse, she grabbed a flashlight and headed out the door. The storm was brutal, but Mia was determined. She made her way to the beach, to their spot, the place where they had shared their first kiss, where they had promised to always be together. The sand was whipped by the wind, and the ocean roared in the distance, but Mia didn't care. When she reached the edge of the beach, drenched and exhausted, she stopped in her tracks. Through the mist of the rain, she saw a figure standing in the distance, his form barely visible in the storm. At first, she thought it was a trick of the wind, her mind playing games with her. But as the figure stepped closer, she could make out his face, thin and weathered, but unmistakable. It was Lucas. Mia's heart raced as she took a step forward, then another. The wind howled in her ears, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heart. As she got closer, Lucas looked at her, his eyes filled with a familiar warmth, despite the years that had passed. "Mia," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. "I'm here. I kept my promise. After all this time, after the endless nights of worry and longing, he was here." "You came back," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I promised I would," Lucas replied, his voice filled with emotion. "Your letters kept me going. They reminded me of home, of you." In that moment, everything else faded away: the storm, the years of separation, the uncertainty. Nothing else mattered. Their love had withstood the test of time, of distance, of war. It had endured, as strong as the waves crashing against the shore, as steadfast as the stars above them. As they stood on the beach, wrapped in each other's arms, the rain washed away the years of pain. The past, with all its uncertainty and fear, no longer mattered. In the cool morning air, she found herself lying on the sand. The first rays of sunlight were breaking through the clouds. She sat up, her heart still racing, and looked around. The beach was empty, no trace of Lucas, no footprints in the sand, no sign of him anywhere. Panicked, she called out his name, her voice echoing across the shore. "Lucas! Lucas, where are you?" She stumbled around, her eyes scanning the horizon, but there was nothing. Only the endless stretch of sand and sea. She ran along the beach, searching for any sign of him, but he was gone. Had it all been a nightmare? A cruel trick of her mind, conjured from the depths of her longing? Exhausted from searching for Lucas, she finally sat down on the sand. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, the salty air filling her lungs. And then, she felt a presence, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't physical, not like the Lucas she had seen in her dream. It was something deeper, something eternal. She could feel him, as if he were beside her, or perhaps Lucas had returned and had been waiting here all along. She might not be able to see him with her eyes, but she could sense him with her heart. "No matter where I am, my heart will always find its way back to you," she whispered Lucas's words to herself softly.